All right, hey, and welcome back. I am excited that you are here. Today, we are talking about shifting timelines. If you've ever wondered if the life you're living is the only version of what's possible for you, let me tell you, there is more, right? There's always more. There are always other choices. There are always ways to bring about something different. And sometimes that is simply tapping into an understanding that there are alternate versions and realities of who you are and how you are already existing, and all you have to do is figure out how to align with that particular potentiality. All right. So I'm Dr. Latoya Davis, a spiritual teacher, Akashic Records master, ancestral lineage healer, and today we are talking about timelines, multiple possibilities, and how you can consciously shift your reality. All right. I try to put the things out in front so I can remember as I'm going through what my goals are. So timelines, multiple possibilities, and how you can shift consciously shift your reality. If you are new to me, I would love for you to hit the subscribe button and then go ahead and hit the like and share. All right. So first, let's dive into what is a timeline. Now, I recognize that, depending on who you're listening to or kind of the field of study that this idea is coming from, the answer might be different. Okay. My goal is to give you a working definition that you can kind of just, boil down to its most simplistic form and understand and move forward with it. You can grow it, you can expand it, whatever. You can take the parts that you like, leave the parts that you don't like. Ain't gonna hurt my feelings, right? But a timeline for me and how I kind of process this is an energetic path that is shaped by your choices, your beliefs, your actions, and your soul blueprint. I want to just highlight that I'm saying it is shaped by the timeline that you are currently in, is shaped by your choices, your beliefs, your actions. Okay? And it's simply an energetic path. So you all know, say it with me, energy follows intent, right? And so if the timeline is simply a path, it's an energetic path, then we get to create what the version of a particular timeline looks and feels like if we understand that it is simply an energetic path that is influenced by the choices, beliefs, and the actions that we take. All right? It is not rigid. A particular timeline is not rigid. Okay? It is responsive. And it's always shifting based on the energy that you embody. Now, as I'm talking, I'm kind of conflicted because there are two ways that are kind of coming through that there are two ways that this concept is wanting to be explained. And as I'm talking to you, I'm trying to lock into one because one, I don't want the video to be too long. And then two, I believe that, kind of the focus of it helps people gravitate or understand it a little bit more. So excuse me while I process in my head which one of these we're going with. So timeline is not rigid, it's responsive. Okay. Think of it like one of the questions that I often get is, or conversations that I have a lot, particularly in kind of my group coaching programs or like the apprenticeship or longer programs where we really dive into a lot more of the kind of metaphysical concepts and ideas, is the idea of like destiny and well, what is my purpose or what is my path? And for me, this idea is limiting because it says that you believe that there is one way to get to like a particular destination, right? You believe that there is a kind of a set path or a set trajectory, and that's absolutely not true, right? That's absolutely not true. It's like if we were using Google Maps, right? And you put in your final destination, and then it gives you like 4 different ways that you could get there, right? And then you click on one of those ways, and then even in that way, it could give you like an alternate or some other detour, right? So all of those are just paths that you can take to get to some particular arrived point, or the place that you're trying to get to. Okay, some paths are longer, some have detours, some are there with ease and flow. So your frequency, or the vibration that you emit, the vibration that you're carrying, the energetic imprints of the thoughts, beliefs, actions, and choices that you make determine which one of these routes you activate, i.e., which timeline you're living in. Okay? I once was doing I was studying, I don't really remember what I was studying, but I was studying something. And was I studying timelines? I don't know. I think I was studying time in general, the idea of like Chronos time and time not being real. I think I was studying that. But in that, this notion came up that every time we make a new choice, we're creating a new timeline, right? Or when presented with the choice and then we pick one, we're creating a new timeline. So for example, for dinner tonight, we're making like rice bowls, right? So I made white rice, and then I'm like, okay, should we have black beans or red beans? And then I chose the red beans, right? Had I chose the black beans, then that would have set off a new possibility, right? That would have opened up other possibilities, versus when I chose the red beans, it opened up this set of possibilities. So this particular theory around timeline said that basically every time you make a choice, when presented with options, you're splitting, and you're now like creating this new timeline. I do understand that as an idea. And when I look at that, I liken it to, or when I look at that kind of idea or perception of the timeline, I liken it to more when I'm teaching people about the Akashic Records, and I'm saying like, we don't use the Akashic Records, or it is not best to use the Akashic Records to predict the future, because there are so many possibilities, right? And every time you make one choice, it sends you this way, and then that choice has more choices, and then that choice has more choices. So there's always this splintering, and because the Akashic field has all potentialities, then you can get lost in the sauce, so to speak, right, of trying to figure out what you're looking at in the future, because you just don't understand all of how to navigate the potentialities. So when understanding that particular idea, that every time we make a new choice, we're creating a new timeline, that's kind of how I think about it, right? And so for me, then that is saying, in using the Akashic Records, I can really help to navigate kind of which way, or the best version, the version that's going to create the most amount of ease and sequence and flow for me, right? So that's one way. Haha, that's funny. I had made up in my mind the direction I was going to have this conversation. Remember, I told you that two ways were coming through for me at the same time, and I was trying to pick one. They just made it so that both are coming in. All right, so that's one way. The other idea of timelines says that there are simultaneous realities happening at the same time, right? So there's this version of me right now that's living this life. There's a version of me in another dimension that's living a life. There's a version of me in another dimension, right? There are these multiple versions of me having concurrent experiences that are all slightly different. And that is another concept of a timeline, right? So the one is happening by choice. I make a choice, it splits. I make a choice, it splits. Each choice creates a new possibility for me to forge something or create something different. Other version, all things are happening simultaneously in various realities. Okay? And either of those, whichever one of those you decide to work with, the idea though that you can actively choose and pick a better version, the happiest version, the version of life that brings you the most joy, the most ease, the most abundance, that you have the authority, that you have the capability, that you have the power. That's the word that I want to use. That you have the power to align yourself with the best and highest version of your reality at any time exists, no matter how we look at timelines. All right. So I'm going to go into the multiple things are happening concurrently at the same time. Right. And I'm in my like group prayer, like we talk about dimensions and the various dimensions and kind of what's happening in each of these dimensions and all of that stuff. I'm not going to go into that here because one, it's not necessary for you to just get this. My goal is for you to be able to know that you have the capacity to make a different choice and then to make that choice and to live in it. And so the nuance, not as important. But if you're into that type of stuff, I invite you to join me in my Aligned, Liberated, and Abundant Inner Circle program, or when I reopen the Self Mastery program, to join me for that. But back to the timelines. All right, so the reality that you're living right now is based on the choices and the beliefs and all of that stuff that are happening. But understand that there is a version of you that exists that is living in a different reality, that is experiencing life in bliss, right? This is me making the assumption that you're not in bliss right now, right? But there's a version of you that is living life in bliss. And our goal is to shorten or to get this version of you in alignment with the version of you that is already living in bliss. And the word already is important, because I want you to understand that it is not something that has to happen, right? It is something that is already happening. Remember, all versions are concurrently existing at the same time, right? So it's not I have to wait for this insert amount of time for this thing to happen. Right? In the future, I can be rich. In the future, I can be happy. In the future, I can have a good spouse. Right? There is a version of a timeline. If that thought, if that belief, if that feeling already exists in you, that means that there is a version of that is already playing out in some timeline. Okay? And so right now, we're saying, how do we get to that version of the timeline? One, I want you to understand that we have to take away the limiting belief that there has to be a process, right? That there has to be struggle or turmoil or strife or whatever it is. Whatever the limiting belief is, we have to identify that and be able to release that. You have to understand that all things are energy, right? Everything is a vibration. And if you can match the energy and the vibration of something, then you can attract or call that thing into you. So then the question becomes, how do I attune myself to the energy and the vibration of that thing, that version of me that already exists, so that I can live that reality here and right now? Okay? One of the things that you can ask yourself is, what future am I creating with today's choices? Right? Or, what would the highest version of me do today? Because that's what we're trying to get to. We are trying to align ourselves with the highest version of ourselves, right? So what would the highest version of me do today? Now, this is the important part, because we can ask the question, but if you're not going to take the action, if you're not going to do the steps, then now we're just out here information gathering, okay? We know how I feel about information gathering, right? What action are we taking? So you're going to ask the question, what would the highest version of me do today? And then you're going to do it, right? You're going to trust the information that you got is accurate and it's real, and then you're going to do it. And you're not going to just ask that question today. You're going to ask it today and tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. And you're going to start to notice how things become more, I was going to say more with ease. Is that correct? I don't know. How things become easier, right? How things start to feel less sticky. How you find yourself in flow, without having to do so much. Okay? The next thing you're going to do is attune yourself to the energy of the version, the best and highest version of yourself that you see and that you know to be possible, or that you think to be possible. Because some of us don't know it yet, right? That we think to be possible. What does that look like? You're going to embody the feelings, the beliefs, and the behaviors of the person who already is living the life that you have. Okay? You're going to exude that confidence. You're going to make choices that are aligned with that. You're going to let what you're perceiving as the then or later become the now. What does that look like? When I first started my business, I still had the limiting belief that I had to, didn't recognize that that is what was happening, but it is. Had the limiting belief that I had to work hard, right? Work hard, hustle hard in order to make money, in order to do these things. My schedule, my body, all of it felt that belief, right? I was taking I want to say one day I had 6 clients, and it was on that day when I was like, wait a minute, we are doing way too much, right? The energetic output that it takes for me to effectively go through 6 clients in a day is crazy. So by the time I got to the weekends, I was completely drained. I didn't have time for my kids, or I was too tired, really, to do anything with them. And I was like, okay, no. And I knew, though, in my spirit and in my heart, that there was a version of me that there was a version, or that I believed that there was a time when my business would create the time freedom that I desired, right? When it would create the income with me putting in less hours than I was doing at work. I believe that. And even though my reality right now said that this isn't the thing, I knew that that was a possibility. So what did I do? I could have kept up the pace and kept up the schedule, because I was like, well, no, this is bringing in the money that I want, right? I am on track to do the things, and nope, this is fine. Everything is fine. The people say that this is how much I should be charging. This is how, I could have completely done that, but I made the choice to say, no, I am going to create in the way that says that my reality is I've created a business that gives me the time freedom as well as the money that I need to be successful. And I want to say that next week, maybe the next week, I went back and I said, okay, how many people can you realistically do? Maintain your energy, deliver good service, right? And still feel whole. From that day forward, I started to create my business in a way that aligned with the version of my life that had time freedom from my business. Did I make all the right choices? Did I fall back? Yep. But I was clear that, so I've always believed since I was a little girl that I'm not given a vision for something that's not possible. Right? I believe that if the thought, the vision, the idea, whatever came to me, then that means that it exists. And what's really funny about that is lately I've been thinking about how all of the things I thought as a child, even about time, I would tell my mom, I'd be this little 5-year-old girl, Mom, time ain't real. Mom, when I'm sleeping and I'm having these things, that's real. I would tell her that, and she'd be like, girl, go sit down. Right? But realizing how all of those things are coming back to me now. I digress. So I've always believed that if I see it, feel it, hear it, know it, that thing is the possibility, right? And so for me, because I had already visioned a version of a business that was rooted in time freedom, that was rooted in me having time for my kids, that was rooted in bringing in enough bringing in enough money that allowed me to not have to work, then it was a possibility. And so before, I was operating in the timeline that was based on limitation. I was operating in a timeline that was being impacted by my limiting beliefs, that was being impacted by societal ideas and conditioning. And it was when I took a step back and said, no, I believe this other thing exists. Let me align with that. Let me make choices that are in alignment with that. Let me believe that to be true. that things started to shift. All right. So first, we're going to ask our questions. What would the highest version of me do today? Or what future am I creating with today's choices? Both of those questions will give you different information that can help you make new choices. Then you're going to attune to the energy of the thing that you want, because remember, it already exists. Only thing we're doing is shifting our vibration so that we can align with it, so that we can bring it into our reality. Okay. Now, if you use the Akashic Records, this is a great one to go into your Akashic Records with. If you don't use the Akashic Records, one, I can teach you how to do that. I have an on-demand course and I have some books. You can find the link in the bio. But, excuse me, if you don't use your Akashic Records, you can also just ask your highest self, right? You can ask the highest version of yourself these questions and still get the answer, okay? So, but if you use your Akashic Records, I want you to open your records and I want you to ask, what needs to shift for me to step into my soul aligned future? What needs to shift, right? This could be, the answer could come as a behavior, as a belief, as an action. Okay, there are multiple ways that something can show up that you might need to shift in order to step into this highest version of yourself. Okay. Other ways, excuse me, I'm at time, y'all. My video is too long. I'll do another video on timelines. What I've given you today, hopefully, is enough. If you are interested in, again, this type of information, this type of talk, I would love for you to join me in the Aligned, Liberated, and Abundant Inner Circle. We dive into this stuff, how to integrate it into your life, how to identify where you are operating in things that do not serve the best and highest version of yourself, and ultimately how to get you to that version. All right. So just to bring it all home, put a little bow on it. The truth is that you're not, people talk about like this new timeline. It's not a new timeline, right? You're not moving to a new timeline. You are going to just make choices to align you to the version of a timeline that already exists, that is more fulfilling, better, easier, whatever your circumstance is, than the one that you're currently in, right? But the timeline already exists. And so you're going to make choices, ask questions, and take action to get you to that version of the timeline quicker. That's all I got. There's more, but we're gonna put a bow on this one, right? So until next time, stay aligned, liberated, and abundant. See you. Peace.